Hi, welcome to WOW Women of Word. I'm Sonia Perez, your host for today, and I have a special guest with us today. I have Cindy Griever from Mrs. G's Jellies, and she is going to take us on a tour of her journey doing business God's way. Welcome, Cindy.
Thanks, Sonia. It's really good to be here with you today.
I want to tell the folks out there that I met Cindy some years ago through another friend, and I'll tell you, it's much different when you meet someone who has been recommended by another sister in God. There's already this thing that happens, that a wall goes down and there's this trust because another sister recommended you to her. You know she's a believer, and so you can immediately come and you're kind of like a college sorority. Like, okay,
It's an immediate trust.
Isn't it an immediate
and you have
trust?
so much in common, and you can already share things that are going on in your life.
I felt that way. I felt that way when I first met you.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk a little bit about how we joined forces. But first, what I want to do, Cindy, is I'd like to find out from you, what was it and how did you come about to say, you know what, my talents or my gifts are in making these wonderful hot pepper jellies, and they are wonderful, by the way. And Mrs. G's is going to go out there and we're going to start packaging some jellies. What day was it and what happened that you decided to do that?
Well, it's a kind of an unusual story because it wasn't something that was kind of organic from something that I was making all of this time. I'm not that great of a cook. I'm an adequate cook. But I just happened to make hot pepper jellies for Christmas, for gifts for people. And my husband and I have been looking for a business to do, just to kind of, when we wind down our other business, and just to kind of have more flexibility in our lives, and just be able to travel more. So we had been talking to some friends about that at church, and actually a couple of ladies who I know really well from church had come up to me and said, those hot pepper jellies that you make at Christmas, we think that everybody needs to taste those. And so
that's a good recommendation.
And so I didn't really, that is not really my strength. My strength is in, I've always been in administrative type roles. I've always been in the corporate world. I was an executive secretary. I was a legal secretary. I was an office manager, but I had never been in the food industry before. And so it's interesting how God leads you into places that you don't know anything about, and kind of leaves you off balance.
Well, and there you go again. There was that connection, that trust. Somebody from church said, "We like what you're doing. It tastes really good.
Yes.
You may want to consider that."
Right.
And that, don't you feel like in business that God does that oftentimes? That sometimes it's a word that you're reading or someone that comes along and brings this idea. And I always feel like, well, that must have been God's idea. Well, let's see how this goes.
Exactly. And I think it's important sometimes, at least for me, because I'm such a control freak, for God to keep me off balance just a little bit, and not necessarily to, because if I was going to do a business, if I was going to create a business for myself, I probably would go for my strengths. And he didn't take me there. He took me in something that I didn't really know anything about, and something that I really needed to learn everything about. I needed to lean into him to do. So.
And doesn't he equip us?
Yes.
He does.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely equips us. Yeah. I want to transition for a moment, because there was a time that Cindy and I, we were actually going into the same kitchen out in San Diego. She was getting her products made, and I have some artisan products, do some cheeses and dressings that we were using the same co-packer to make them in San Diego. And it was actually Cindy who had recommended this person, to do my packaging. After some events that had happened, he ended up having to close his doors, and Cindy's way ahead of me at this point. She's already got orders to fill and some functions that were coming up, and some dedicated time at farmers markets, which is, a lot of what happens when you're first going out in business and introducing your products, and a decision had to be made. Where are you going to have that? Because if you don't know anything about the food world, co-packing is not something you're going to find everywhere. They're few and far between, and the good ones are kind of far away. And so here's where I want to ask this question, and that is, because I think that's a good example, and that is, what do you do? What's the thought that comes into your mind first? And let's just be real, because we are women of God and we know we go to His Word, but there is this time where we hit this adversity and something comes to mind, and then we do X, Y, and Z. So tell us about how you handle adversity.
Okay. Well, I guess on that, I just wanted to talk about that specific instance because that was really a turning point. And it was a turning point not only in our business, but it was a turning point for my learning how to trust the Lord. Because He had already kind of indicated to us and opened doors for us in that business. And so I knew that we had favor and that we should move forward. But then that I had bought everything for that one production run,
Yes.
and even the fresh peppers and everything. And he called me that night and said, "I'm out of business." And so that night, Kent and I, my husband and I, sat and said, what does this mean? Does it mean that the Lord is closing the door on this? And we prayed, and everything that I'd been reading in the past week was about the promised land, or going forward with what God has told you to do, and just standing on His promises and doing, even if it doesn't make sense, even if it's unreasonable. So I think that was a real turning point, and I believe that God was very clear about what we were to do at that point, and so we looked for another co-packer. But so I think that the principle in all of that is just to stop and say, are you sure that this is where the Lord wants you to go? Has there been clear direction? And if there is, then the obstacles are either allowed by Him there, or it's something that you're doing wrong and you have to turn around and go the other direction. And always the answer is to pray and to seek God's will.
Absolutely.
And to know what His direction is for your company. So,
And that's doing well, and that leads on to the next question before I give it away, but I'm going to segue into the next part of that, and that question is that, being a Christian woman, and even though, we are a Christian, we do seek God, but at the same time, we do live in this world. We're not of the world, and we understand that as believers, but we do live in this world. We do business in this world. We have to interact with people who are not believers. And so with that, my question is, how do you do business God's way in the world?
Well, I think, first of all, the principles that you use in your business need to be godly principles. And of course, we try to live by integrity and honesty and fairness, and we try to pay our bills on time. Things like that. And but I think more than that too is sometimes you don't even realize what an example you are to people. I know even at the market, some people, when we left them, we were at Little Italy, and when we left
Little Italy is in San Diego.
Yeah, Mercado. And when we left the market there, some people, a Korean family was next to us, and they came up to us and said, "We're so sad that you're leaving." And I hadn't really had even that much interaction with them, but evidently they had been watching us. And I'm not saying this to brag. I'm just saying that when you have to recognize that people are watching you wherever you are. And this grandma of the family came up to me, and she hardly even spoke English, and she said, through her daughter, she said, "We want to have your information because we don't know anyone like you." And so you have to understand that we don't even recognize sometimes how different we are from the world. And because probably they saw the worst of us, because Kent and I kind of snip at each other when we're at the market because we're tired. And
it's a lot of work.
Yeah, and so I had the impression that they saw the worst of us. But here's this woman that was watching us, and by God's grace, she saw something in us, that we didn't even know was coming through. And so it's just such a blessing. You just have to, recognize that wherever you are, you're taking Christ in you.
Yes,
and
yes.
the Holy Spirit is exhibiting you.
Absolutely, Cindy. It is so true. Thank you for sharing that. That's something that I think that we don't really get around the table to talk about is how are we honoring God when we come out into business? And a lot of times I'm interacting with people in the world, and I always have to get myself back and go, this is about the Lord. How am I going to glorify Him in this? And if it's not, I always say, if I don't have peace about it, then I can't move forward. He's the one. Maybe I need to sleep on it, and he's got, you know, a better plan for me.
And I think we always have to, I always have to recognize this is God's business, it's not mine.
Yes.
And He's given us everything. I would have never picked this business for myself. So I know it's God's business. I think He had to do that with me because I would have picked, like I said, a strength. But so everything that we do is just, if we run into an obstacle, it's like, okay, God, how are you going to fix this? Because it's your business.
Yes.
It's not mine.
Well, I'm gonna close with a couple of words because we're nearing the end, and I want to make sure that I bring this in, and that is that I've been watching Cindy. I'm watching her too, and I'm a believer. But it's so exciting to see how God's been working in her from her humble beginnings, and I see her. I know how much work.
God's grace.
Yes, God's favor, God's grace. He's all over it because I see how hard, her and her husband work, and we did a farmer's market together. We fused our flavors together because it's very delicious, and I watch how her and her husband work, and I love to see that support that happens with both of you. So I could see what the family had seen, but so ever since we've met, I'm always thinking of new things to do with her hot pepper jellies.
We should do that more.
I know. We during the holidays, I'm like, what can I do with Cindy's jelly? I know. Let's bake ham with one of her hot pepper jellies. Let's use the mango and sweeten it up, and it always comes out so delicious. And my charcuterie platters with all the grilled vegetables, my cheese spread complemented with her pepper jelly up on the top. People just their mouth is just having a party inside of it. This is how they explain it. But so I've been working with some Asian flavors, and a lot of times you will buy some bottled jellies and or sweetness that goes over your spring rolls. But oftentimes they have either too much sugar or maybe just a lot of processed chemicals. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to try her mango or her peach habanero jelly to go over our spring egg rolls. So we are going to say goodbye, and we're going to enjoy her jelly and spring rolls. And I just want to encourage each and every one of you that if you don't have a woman of God next to you in your business, find them. Have them come alongside of you to help you, encourage you, edify you, uplift you, and have that trust.
Like Sonia. You've been very encouraging to me. I really appreciate it. God's really blessed me with your friendship.
Oh, thank you. I feel the same way. She's just she's been a real gem. And we've been working with each other, helping each other. So we hope this episode has helped you and that you have a wonderful, abundant endeavor. Thank you.